Late start today. There was a a power outage, and my alarm went off fine because I stayed up for a couple of hours to make sure that I could set it. I probably would have been better off waking up with the daylight, but I can't sleep when something like that happens. Okay, so we got to kind of hurry here. I punch drunk. The last video hasn't really. YouTube must have changed something in their format, so it's not showing up on other sites. So this Russian fleet here was basically caught in irons. They were unable to move in the first impulse. We also see the ice pack beginning to form up here in the north. Over here, something a little more interesting. The Swedes decided to give the Russians the initiative. Why? Well, because Swedish troops are better on the attack, and that's been kind of hurting them in the last couple of attacks. So they figured, well, we'll give the Russians the defensive advantage instead. I wasn't thinking very clearly because that's where my depot is, which means I lose the artillery advantage for that. I also have a new timid leader, my erstwhile commander-in-chief, and this is not the original, Stahl von Holstein. Okay. And that's not what I thought it said before. I didn't think it said Saxville-Baggins, but I thought it said Saxe-Weimar or something. It's much easier with this light. Okay, so anyway, the Russians moved in, put a blockade in place here. Now, they still don't have a lot going for them. This is a galley fleet, so actually it couldn't bombard. I don't have a bombard with it. I didn't realize that with the support fleet was unable to really help that much. I really should have a depot on there. So I'm screwing up left and right. The Swedes attack in. They are surprised. And then I find out, crap, last night I was playing things wrong. I could have used the Pioneer, and I used him this time because it's 1 per 3 wings. So, you know, any army in this game, the biggest they get is 25 strength points, so unless it's a combined force, and even then it would have to be just about all the pieces in the game, it's only going to be 3 wings max. So anyway, the Russians were entrenched this time, and I'm thinking, ah, crap. The die rolls were about even, and the modifiers, these are the minuses on them. You can see them over here as well. Anyway, it went 2 rounds of combat. The Russians, because of their A morale, this is the thing I forgot. The A morale bumps them up to needing to lose 2 wings instead of 1. So it was a risky situation. However, the table was a little better for the Swedes. It would not have been unreasonable for the, given, you know, no good rolls, for the Russians not to be able to break them. But now I've got to fight in this position again and again and again, unless I can win a battle and stay here. So that's kind of going to be a painful situation. I think the Russians may be able to set up a blockade. However, this is their last turn for this offensive, and if they don't make it, they fail. So, well, their army is also looking terrible. They're almost at the point, in fact, they may have reached the point where they no longer can be B morale. No. Yeah, I think they dropped down to C morale. Of course, I could start losing units, and we got Russians captured here. All right, I gotta go work. End of the second impulse here, and we got some kind of neat stuff happening. Gotta try to move slowly so I don't pan too quickly. First of all, YouTube screwed me up. The last video is not embedding anywhere. So if you missed that and you're watching these normally, go back to my YouTube channel, and you'll see the video before this. I don't know if I mentioned that. I don't think so. Anyway, Russian fleet's in place to attack at Revel. They have to get in there, but they didn't quite make it all the way. I did note the supply functionality across these maps. It actually does exist in the Ghost of Charles combined rolls. Essentially, you're paying movement points for each, I guess, major space between the two for supply spaces. And those can be interdicted spaces, in which case, wow, what's this guy doing out here? Is he in range of anything? You know, I'm going to exhaust him. I don't think he can be there. I think I left his range. He's in range now where he could be, but I don't think he always was. Anyway, got left behind by the interdiction mission. So those supply rules are actually well defined and work out reasonably well, I believe. But I kind of just fudging them with the land rule ones, because unless the navies are in play, they should work out the way they do. Over here, the Russians moved in again to launch their siege. The Swedes, going second, moved in. Well, I didn't take into account how bad off the Russian army is, and boy, it was a mistake to stick around. I was down on the E level. No other quality was able to amass 5 units, and the Russians were defeated, and actually that means we get just a point for the Swedes for winning a battle with a captain generals present. But yeah, that looks like that's the end of this offensive. I could keep smacking in there with the Russians, but at equality with their auxiliary pool, whatever advantage they had in that, pretty much depleted. I forgot to use my priest, damn it. It just isn't gonna cut it. I'm not going to be able to dislodge the Swedes. The Swedes are still actually a very good quality, but I don't know that with the Russians. I just know I haven't been doing a lot of damage to them. The results weren't tremendous. It wasn't a rout, for example, but they're sufficient to end this campaign a little early. One thing going really against the Swedes, though, is their officer pool is getting very small. Now, some of them are over here in the captured pool, and those can be exchanged. There's a few Russians here. There's a larger pool of Russian generals to begin with, which is why they have so many more. But there's a lot of dead Swedes here, however you want to take that. They've been taking a lot of hits of real casualties. They also will be getting one guy back this turn. And they've really been losing a lot of generals here. That could be a problem, conceivably. You don't want to be left without enough commanders, because then you get like 0 ranked people with, no personality bonuses. I think they're all timid or something. It really would be an awful situation, much worse than the worst generals that are out there. That's probably an overstatement of how bad the case could be. But you really don't want to lose your generals. You don't have a lot of control of that. All right, well, halfway through this turn, and probably at kind of a point where the campaigning season is over. Okay, here the third impulse of the turn, of the last turn of the year. And the Swedes are almost done with their blockade of Revel. The Russian fleet tried to slip in. It automatically got intercepted, and with less effective leadership, they were unable to get into the port. They were driven off, and the Swedes had the wind gauge, etc. Get a little bit of a gale blowing here, which may clear up on the next impulse. The Russian fleet is essentially sailing back to Kronstadt, St. Petersburg, so it can recover from its disorganization. Chances are very high they're just not going to be able to succeed in their mission. They have to make it to Revel. Very good chance that, it's going to be end of the year, so their order gets discarded automatically. So basically, they do not have an opportunity to score this one. So they're going to get a failed order here. The Swedes were already in the lead here. They're going to get another successful order. They're going to get the point for most successes. They do have to try to slip this guy home somehow, though. Over here on the land phase, absolutely nothing happened. Neither the Swedes nor Russians want to move. The Russians know they can't win the battle. The Swedes could launch an attack and try to hit those poor Russians. They'd be in supply. However, they're kind of lazy. They probably should have attacked, actually. They get to go second. It would be worth the risk. They fought battles, so they're not gonna get the automatic recovery. So it was probably a mistake not to attack. I'll probably attack in that fourth quarter then. I don't know, maybe. We'll see. Zipping up the turn, I didn't realize how bad both the Swedish and Russian main ship, their ship of the line counter in those squadrons were, or squadrons in the formations were. They were actually both on the +10 side, so I had to kind of try to figure out where I was and cause the damage to the check for damage against the ships. And a number of ships sunk, both in the move here. This fleet is probably going to lose the last ship of the line off of it. So both nations' fleets are kind of foundering at this point. No way that this would have, I don't know. I don't know if it would have happened or not. If I'd known what I was doing. It does make the Danes a little more worrisome, though. The Russian and Swedes are both wiping each other out. We moved at the end of the year. You can see the Russian prestige is down to just about nothing. The Swedish one is not at the top of the chart. Over here, the Russians failed in their campaign, and that hurt their prestige a little. The Swedes didn't gain anything from that, though. The Russians pulled out of the battle. They managed. They have that good leader, Lacy, so they can withdraw from battle a little easier. Also, both sides actually called off all their campaigns, so they were able to get some points there, and that's kind of nice. And we'll start another turn, and we'll probably run through on this video most of the spring or most of the winter turn. The one thing that might be a little tricky. This shouldn't be here. This should be an E or something, I don't know. The one thing that I haven't really been paying attention to is, or that the replacement of the prisoner of war. This is going to be the first time it actually happens coming up here, because last year the diplomatic insult caused that not to happen, assuming no event comes into place. Overall, I think the Swedes are doing far better than they did historically. They've stopped the Russians here. They're not in total collapse there, although they are definitely losing, and they're completely winning the naval war as it goes. They have just a better leader. Neither side canned its admiral. They both rolled zeros. For the Russians, I don't know how many points they fell back. It's, there's so many things you have to keep track of throughout the whole turn. So for this whole last year, how many points did the Russians lose? If they lost like 6, they had an automatic canning, but I don't know how many they lost. I really don't. I think they were kicking around down around here, which means that they did survive, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, it's hard to remember all the things you do have to keep track of, because you will need them later. Though, how big a deal is it if you miss? So this guy's well connected. He stayed in power. Whatever. All right. Okay, in order to avoid attrition, whatever, absolutely nothing could happen, actually, in the Finnish the land map, because nobody had any campaigns going. Nobody really wants to move, though. But over here on the naval map, we did have a Swedish fleet stuck over here, and we can see the ice pack is forming already. And he was up here. That doesn't affect him. Ooh, I forgot to mark these suckers. We've gone through 4 impulses. I think that is going to pretty much fill everything in. So this is all frozen. This is frozen solid. You can actually walk across it for whatever it's worth. At this point in the game, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Sometimes it does make sense to maybe make a crossing here, but it's really expensive on attrition to walk across the ice, and that kind of makes a lot of sense. Anyway, this guy had to slip away real quick. He's trying to get down to his port in time, but he's got a big problem. He got really caught up over here, unable to proceed against the prevailing winds, and didn't quite make it. So if the ice roll is bad next turn, he's going to have to try to look for some place he can sail to. Helsingborg, or Borg. That's a kind of I don't know. He's got a couple of ports he can go to, but it's not where I want. I really do want to go to Karlskrona. And I could get really unlucky because all of this could freeze. And then I don't know what would happen. Hopefully I wouldn't be staying stuck out at sea. All right, we had a big wind continuing and it swept up into there. Anyway, I guess that's about it. We'll do the administrative. Well, after rolling my negotiations table, and I got a agreement near, which provides a -1, which is good for the Russians. That means I'm going to be giving them additional ops points, I believe. But I forgot something. I've completely forgotten about the Danes. Now, they're an optional rule, and you could say, hey, what the hell? But I've gone through basically 4 turns. I'm going to run through them very quickly because I do want to see what happens here, because I haven't been paying attention to them. But what did I have? I had talks broken off at least once, or maybe talks stalled. So I'm going to do the last year to see what happens. So -2 on the talks broken off. That didn't get me anywhere. That's a 6. I do a talk stalled at -1. That's a 5. That's not getting anywhere. The reason I'm doing the last year is these start after the coup that happened here. So I'm just going to do the events phases that followed that. Then I think I had a no modifiers one, which didn't get us anywhere. And now this turn, we're at agreement near, so it's becoming less likely that they'll get involved, but they get an advancement of a box finally. Now, I'm going to put a marker here for now. That puts them up to intrigue. What does that mean? Intrigue. The Danish intrigue modifier will start playing on the Reichstag and negotiations table. So there's going to be a modifier that affects those. In the case of the Reichstag table, unfortunately, I'm going to have to look in the rules to try to find that, if I can remember it. But, you know, if the Danes don't get involved before everything ceases at all, I'm probably not going to continue with them. I just want to see what's going on there. All right. Okay, and we roll into February, and in terms of the overall, strategic decisions in the admin phase, not a lot was done. We did see the transfer of prisoners, though. All the Swedish prisoners of war are back in Russian hands. The Swedes did not need these strength points. The recovery levels seem high enough in the game, and the fact that nothing really that important is captured. It's just these, strength point values, essentially, or quality value, or whatever, that seems, unless I'm mistaking how this works, that's captured. The Russians aren't holding anything that important. You can see the Swedish army is full up. They didn't need that. So rather than waste these, which may come in handy someday, right? They asked for their generals back, but they got lousy generals out of it. They only had lousy generals in command. They didn't want the marshal. He's even worse because he could take over as commander-in-chief. For the Russians, they got everything back, and they had taken so many losses from attrition, etc. They were basically able to recoup their army. And this is where I made a humongous mistake with the Swedes. This turn, I should have been attacking with them. The Russian army was in no position. It could not have held out. A Swedish attack would have definitely gotten to Borgo. Had that happened, I haven't rolled for ops points. They're iffy whether or not they'll happen. But had that happened, that would push this back here and put me in a position where maybe I'd have enough time to start recovering. Plus, destroying that Russian army would make it much more expensive for them, to recover them. They'd have to recoup them back here and then transport them or move them somehow. And that would be a more painful process. Anyway, such is life. Oops. It's not surprising that this guy, who is cowardly, or whatever, timid, I think is the word they use for it. Timid sounds a little, but cautious is the other one. Wouldn't do that So I'm cool with it, but I definitely let an opportunity pass. And that's one thing, you always have to be on your toes mentally in this game, because you have to try to figure out, do I have the advantage at this moment? Is this the time to strike? Is this that magic moment? And that's very interesting. I want to play this sucker opposed, I'm telling you. More the land game than the naval game, but the naval game's interesting too. Just you can't make those decisions. So hidden information's one thing. Here, it's being able to take the time to make those kind of decisions that I can't do in a solitaire game, and they look really interesting. All right, I'm going to load this one up, and then I got to check to see if ops points increased.